what I'm talking about this morning is really about sort of what was happening in the 19th century in the Athlone Yacht Club from the 1930s. We'll look at the decisions made by the various yacht club committees to ensure that the regattas were a social and a financial success. It does appear that a great lack of continuity among the personnel involved from year to year. So sort of the people who organised 1 year didn't organise it the next year, which created a lot of problems. Furthermore, it was normal to declare the date for the regatta only 2 or 3 weeks before it actually happened, which didn't give a lot of time for preparation of putting up tents and all the other things that needed to be done. This picture is just an image of a boat from that kind of time. In 1835, as Garage has said, the 4-day annual regatta was held at Ballyglass, proudly advertised in the local media, in the Athlone Sentinel and the Athlone Independent. The Commodore was John Williams Digby of Landonstown, County Kildare. Now that seems rather strange to have a Commodore from Kildare, but he was probably related to the Digbys of Drumdaff in Roscommon. And his committee consisted of Edward Hodson of Rockhill, Kiltoom, Dennis Daly, William Boswell, who actually was the auctioneer who had sold the island a few years previously, who had offered Carbery Island for sale, to let. Also on the committee was Edward Byrne, Charles Henry Dillon, and we heard about the Dillons here a moment ago as well, Leonard Hodson from Hudson Bay, and R.M. Joyce, who was their able secretary. Prizes were given for yachts not exceeding 30 tons. And in fact, of the 12 yachts that were competing, none were larger than 20 tons. So the Louisa, which is described in some depth in the little booklet that we heard is available for sale, the Louisa was a 20-ton yacht that looked something like that. Looks very similar actually to the drawing that Daniel Gross prepared, with exactly the same yellow line there. See the yellow lines? Yeah. Exactly the same yellow lines. It's got a jib and a foresail and a gaff-rigged mainsail. With a blunt bow, these yachts were described as hooker type because of the blunt bow. Races were held for gentlemen in 4-oar gigs of less than 30 feet. So here there's a typical of the kind of boats that they would have been rowing in at that time, substantially larger than the 18-foot boat that we're more familiar with today. This one belongs to Brian Bond from the 1860s. And it was a class-based society, and there was a race for fishermen in 4-oared cots. This Bond boat was borrowed by the Black Islanders to compete in the regatta. So the regatta ran from Tuesday to Friday. There were no weekends in those days. And Sundays were a day of prayer. So the only days that were available was the rest of the week. Each day there was a different race included for yachts, races for yachts of 19-foot keel. There were estimated to be 10,000 spectators at the regatta to see the big yachts and to listen to bagpipe music, to take a few drinks, to show off their eligible daughters, and even to take to the dance floor. Now, taking to the dance floor is kind of interesting because the technique was that you brought your own door with you for dancing on. So that's what people were recommended to do, bring a door so that your daughter can dance on it. The regatta was a huge success. Under the sailing regulations, larboard shall give way to starboard on pain of losing the race or of paying all damages that may be advised. So in 1841, the driving force of the club's success, Richard M. Joyce, honorary secretary, went into bankruptcy with a large quantity of sherries, port wines, pickles, spices, cigars, dye stuffs, oils, pitch tar, turpentine, ironmongery, were all put up for auction. And as a result, there was no regatta that year, but instead the crowds attended Batty's Royal Circus and a living representation of the ever memorable and glorious Battle of Waterloo. Now, the interesting part of that particular event is that Lord Castlemaine and Major Temple were the patrons for it. Now, any yacht club, if it's going to succeed, it needs to have a patron. So in 1845, the joint patrons of the regatta were the Right Honourable Lord Richard Castlemaine from Moydrum, Lord Harris from Worcester, and the Honourable Lawrence Harmon King Harmon from Newcastle House. The committee was Major Caulfield of Dunamon Castle, Major Deeds from the 34th Regiment in Athlone, Gustavus Temple from Worcester, son of Lord Harris, Edward Monsell of Killinure, Edward Hodson, Arthur Smith, and William H. Daniel from Portlake Castle. And Daniel was the new secretary. So you had to have a good patron if you were going to have a good regatta. So as you can see there, the patrons, they had 3 patrons. They must have been really good. The highlight of the regatta was a private rowing match between Messrs. Christian and Crosby of the Pembroke Rowing Club in Dublin and Ralph and Sidney Smith from Portlake Castle. Each of these had put up a £50 wager. Now, in 1845, £50 is pretty well close to €6,000. So it was quite a hell of a lot of money to put up for a rowing match. The Smiths from Portlake Castle were the worthy winners, and it's worth noting that there was more interest in rowing than there was in the sailing that year, and the spectators put substantial bets on the outcomes of all the rowing challenges. While the famine was ravaging the region, the 1846 regatta was transferred to Coosan Point and Hare Island, and a ferry service was put in place to bring revellers to the island, where feasting took place, followed by dancing to Senor Cavallini and his band, and they danced until an early hour. There were 7 big yachts competing. The Alarm, the Mystery, that Mystery was a 4-tonner, Perry a 10-tonner, Antelope, Gazelle a 6-tonner, Nymph an 8-tonner, and Don Juan a 7-tonner. One must remember that all the trophies at these regattas were Gold Cup. Even if they were Gold Cups, they tended to be won outright. After the famine, the Shannon Commissioners' work, as Harmon had described, was complete. And this would have enabled the boats from Lough Yacht Club to come up and compete at Athlone Yacht Club regattas. But nobody came until the 1870s. By 1851, the regatta had returned to Hillquarter, but there was no patron and no commodore mentioned. The 2-day regatta being organised by stewards. It's only 2 days now, so they were cutting their cloth to what they could afford. 2-day regatta organised by Captain Sayre of the 1st Dragoon Guards, Captain Leslie of the 9th Regiment, and W.H. Maitland, Esquire. This is the same year that the railway bridge in the town was being completed. And there were 3 yachts competing over 5 tons and 3 yachts under 5 tons. By 1856, Richard III Lord Castlemaine and George I Marquess of Westmeath were the regatta patrons, with the stewards the Honourable H. Hancock MP, William Potts from Ballinasloe, L. Dundas Esquire from Roscommon, Samuel Hodson Esquire, William Lewis from the Royal Navy, C.J. Minchin, a captain of the Roscommon Regiment, and T.M. Nacton. P. Grehan of Mount Plunkett was the secretary. At this stage, the style of yachts were sturdily built cutters rigged with a mainsail, topsail and jib. As you can see in this sketch, which was done by one of the Levings. The drawing actually shows a vessel called the Little Flirt. And an innovation in that year was a women's rowing race in cots, with entries accepted only from women who are usually employed plying for turf, as Harman had told us. In 1862, the stewards were Messrs. Brophy, Swain, Dillon, McManus, Judge, Tipping, Woods, Gladstone and Keeley, with F. Campbell as treasurer and Joseph O'Carroll as the Honourable Secretary. The cutter-rigged yachts competing were Fanny, Mary Alice, Don Juan, Wasp and Adventurer. Some attendees came in their steam yachts, as you can see here. The regatta took place where the river expands to Lough. On shore, the spectators could buy pig's trotters, grilled eels and gingerbread. Gareth, there's an idea for the regatta for this year. Another idea, shore-based activities for the 1862 regatta included climbing a slippery pole, racing in sacks, foot racing, the ascent of 2 balloons, and finally fireworks by Mr. Lawrence of Grafton Street, which were held near the railway bridge. From about 1870, the Athlone Boat Club split from the rowing club, and a rowing regatta was held in the town. So it took away a lot of the spectators from the regattas round about that time. So the spectators all wanted to watch the rowing. They understood it a little bit better, perhaps. In 1875, the Lough Derg yachts came in strength to both Athlone Yacht Club and the Gailey Bay Yacht Club, Gailey Bay Regattas. This picture shows the Countess over there somewhere. Pretty big yacht. Countess being towed by the steamer Ballymurta. All the prizes that year were won by Captain Smithick's Countess, which is a 15-tonner, and Mr. Jackson's 8-ton Hady, which had sailed around from Galway for the regatta. This was the heyday of the big yachts, the really big yachts, such as the Iris, which had been recently built by T. Ward in Athlone. Also, the Dream, Audax and Corsair competed. In the 1887 regatta, racing was held for 18-foot sprit centreboards with 9 boats competing, including Robert Leving in Durris, SS Swain in Nell, who had won by less than a minute. The first starting gun for the 18-footers was at 11:30 in the morning, and under the regulations there was a recall gun to be fired at 6:30 in the evening, when all unfinished races should be adjourned and rehold them the following day. In addition, there were 7 yachts between 3 tons and 15 tons, including Sidney Smith's 15-ton Audax. So I think you're all pretty familiar with this picture, which is in the club, but I've fleshed it out a little bit by just showing exactly how much sail area she was actually carrying. She's quite impressive. She has a topsail up here, which is flown off a gaff. See the gaff there? And that gaff is attached to a topmast, which runs from there to there, and the actual main mast only runs to about here. So it's quite a complex kind of a rig that she has. She has a flying jib, and had a crew of 3 men and a boy. So that's a hell of a lot of sail area to control for 3 men and a boy. Reports commented on the use of flying starts for the first time in 1887. Now, flying starts, we can explain them a little bit like this. So this is what the start of a yacht race used to look like. And, if you look very carefully, you can see red buoys laid on the ground, just laid in the river. So the stewards had to lay these buoys in an exact straight line. And as each boat starting gun went off, she hoisted her jib and she hoisted her foresail and dropped a hawser and then started sailing and attempted not to hit the other boats in the process. So this idea of a flying start, where the yacht sailed around in the starting area until the gun was actually borrowed from steeplechasing. In 1895, the club was reorganised under the title Lough Yacht Club, and Charlie's Island, opposite Knieve's shed, was rented from the Border Works, with the objective of building a yacht club there, in close proximity to the town. Meanwhile, the club placed a flag boat on a mooring off Ballyglass, which served as their clubhouse and as a starting boat. In 1897, the Lough Yacht Club Committee of 5 met in the Prince of Wales Hotel. So there were 5 members of the committee. They passed a proposal to accept lady members. And immediately Mr. Robert W. Smith and W.P. Wallace resigned from the club membership. So for the 1897 regatta, the Right Honourable Albert Lord Castlemaine was Commodore. The Reverend R.S.D. Campbell, D.D., Dean of Clonmacnoise, was Vice Commodore. Francis Travers Dames Longworth was President. Charles O'Donoghue as Vice President. Mr. Bale from the Ranelagh School as the Honour Secretary. M. Gagan, Chairman of the Town Councillor, as the Honourable Treasurer. And despite all of these guys, the racing was a mess. There were many entries, but due to signalling errors, only 3 boats started the big race. All of the Lough Derg visitors were so annoyed that they organised a handicap race for themselves. The yachts had evolved away from boats measured by tonnage at that stage to much more lightweight boats, to boats much more like this. Which was owned by G.T. Parsons of Athlone. Just to give you a sense of what she was like, she was 24 foot long. She was less than a ton in weight, less than a ton in displacement, but she carried 500 square foot of sail area. So she was a pretty impressive vessel, she really was. In 1914, the Westmeath Independent reported that the Lough Yacht Club would have a much needed clubhouse this year. So there we have a photograph of the new clubhouse. This original one-room clubhouse survives today as a committee room in this clubhouse. In 1927, the Motor Yacht Club built a second building, which you can see here, which is the Starter's Hut, which was built the year before the Taunton Games, which were put on here for the motorboat racing for the Taunton Games, were run out of Athlone. So they needed a starting hut for that major event. So that is the end of this module. Thank you all very much.